Okay, so part two now. So
Yes.
again, what we're talking about right now is that concept of Scorpio. It's playing out very well, very obviously, in a world where people are trying to hang on. They're trying to hang on to the way they understood the world before. And you're seeing this as a part of the nature of the sign of Scorpio, where
Or they're just being automatons and they're going to be punished for being automatons.
and well,
No, I'm serious.
look,
Think about it this way. Think about it this way. Like, so today I made several observations, but I'm going to share with you one of them. So think about it like this. You are a corporate wage slave, right? You go and you are consumed by only your job. You literally live to work, and you're giving your life force to that soul-sucking corporation, only to be taxed like 47%. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I got to return your taxes. Yeah, because they took too much in the beginning, but that's neither here nor there. And so you're consumed every single day about your job, about your job, about your job, 5 days a week, sometimes 7. And then, of course, with the advent of the cell phone and whatnot, the company you're always in touch. Then you don't have time to go and dig and research. God forbid, because companies are sick like this. They only like people that are married with kids, because those people are dependent on their job and therefore will go and acquiesce to almost anything because they are dependent. They have a mortgage and they have kids to feed and a spouse to support. Perfect profile to go and keep you as a wage slave. Completely perfect.
So
and then
I want to jump on this real quick. If
Yep.
you let me, because everything you're talking about is in line with another major concept of Scorpio. And you said at the very beginning, if you're going to hold on to it, you're going to become an automaton. And the operative word, and the operative word there is the word become. And as Debbie probably knows, become is another word for transformation. And because in order for you to hold on to your way of looking at reality, in order for you to believe that the government and its systems and the corporations are good for you, you need to change. So you cease being human and you become an automaton. But if you want to be human, and if you want to remain a human, then what has to happen is there's a death. And what's that death? The death is your understanding of the world that starts with who you trust. Because once you stop trusting the system, once you stop trusting governments and institutions and the scientific community or what have you, right? That means this all restarts for you. You go back. You have to reevaluate your contract. You reevaluate.
You go back and you get your power back. That's what happens.
Well, yeah, you get your power back, but you're not a part of a big world anymore. The big worlds happen in the 9th, 10th, and 11th houses in Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Aquarius. You want to be connected to the big world, you got to be connected with those signs, but you cannot get to those signs until you resolve what happens in Scorpio. And this is the big thing that's happening is everyone wants to be connected to the big things. They want to be connected to their understanding of the world because it gives them ease, it gives them security. They want to have access to these governments because whether or not you want to believe it, the government will still give you some protection, but they'll also give you your highest accolades, your highest status, your highest recognition. And you want to be connected to Aquarius because that's where you get your wealth. Your big gains, the gains that are much bigger than you even necessarily earn, happens in Aquarius, right?
Yep.
You see this in Scorpio.
Your goals, your
dreams, yes,
hopes, yeah.
It can't happen. It can't happen. That's part of the reason why people still want to trust the system, is because in their mind, and they're correct about this. They're not going to be able to get to those dreams and hopes and aspirations if they can't trust the world as it is. But the reality is, and this is the
reality is, it's all a lie. And the way that the system is designed is to have you chasing like a hamster on a wheel, and you'll never get rich. You'll never attain that. In order to get real wealth, you have to break out of the system and create your own path, which is hard, and which makes most people shit their pants and not even bother trying.
But again,
why? If it was easy, everyone would do it. Just remember that.
Yeah, sure. And again, I mean,
Whatever
Scorpio,
Elon Musk had to
Scorpio is
pay for his billions, I'm pretty
sure
sure
it wasn't easy.
he's not too happy about
Right.
it.
And that's the concept of this sign of Scorpio, is there's also high cost
A
to a lot
sac-
of things.
Yeah, sacrifice.
hot-
It's like imagine Rumpelstiltskin.
Mhm. Yep.
Scorpio.
Everything,
Rumpelstiltskin,
listen, everything
Rumpelstiltskin.
requires
There
a
we go.
sacrifice. And the
Mhm.
older I get, the more I realize just what levels of sacrifice you have to sacrifice. And some people, listen, some people attain the success and you're like, how did that motherfucker get there? Well, guess what? They sometimes sacrifice things without realize that they sacrifice things. And I know it's really sick, but I think I'm going to keep that for a future episode because it gets to like the really nasty, ugly stuff. And I just don't want to go there right now.
Well, but which is also appropriate for this concept of Scorpio, right? Because it is nasty, it is ugly, because it's the point where the fantasy shatters, right? Like the fantasy shatters depending on what it is that you want to be as an individual, and you're just running into this point because for all of us, I think we can all point to a moment in our lives where the fantasy shattered. I know for me, it was the beginning of it was in my early 20s when I, like everyone else, trusted the system. I was corralled into the auditoriums as a 15-year-old, and they would give you presentation after presentation about why you need to go to college and why you should never fear student loan debt, right? And even if like, no matter how much debt you take out, and of course, the concept of debt is also found in what sign?
Scorpio.
Right, exactly. So
yes, well, actually, debt is a sixth house matter.
Actually, it's a sixth house matter. Right, it is. It's a sixth house matter.
Sixth house matter.
But
Yeah.
there's a but I
But
know
if you can't pay it, it turns into an eighth house matter.
right. And so we're all told about,
Elon Musk also had a wonderful the quip about that. He's like, they won't let an 18-year-old take out a $10,000 business loan, but they'll allow you to take $100,000 student loan. That should tell you everything about the system.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
it's so sick.
It is very sick.
And so I went there and I took out all this debt, and I got into psychology and economics, and the economics degree, by the time I was like 20, 21, I looked around and I was like, oh my God, I'm screwed. Because I recognized what I took out. It was 2000. It was in the midst of the Great Recession, right? And I realized that I made a massive mistake trusting my elders and trusting everyone within the system who told me to take all these decisions. And what's so funny about all of them when I talked about it? They all turned the finger to me and they said, well, you never put the gun to your head to sign those papers. And I'm like, but excuse me, you guys basically said this was the best decision of my life and that I should do it. You corralled me in auditoriums. You gave me nothing but propaganda to go down this path. And once I realized I could have lived without this in its entirety, in terms of what I learned, and I would have had, not just the $50,000 or whatever you forced me to take out, but all of the interest that came along with it, right? I didn't need any of this, and they kind of looked at me and said, "Oh, it's all my fault, not their fault," right? And that's when
sounds like what they're going to be talking about the vaccine,
right?
Once the vaccine injuries start happening. Well, you took it. We gave you a choice,
right? And that's what we're going to run into. It's the same thing. It's a constant because that's how these issues of trust play out. They take advantage of the fact that you trust them, and they get you to go a certain way, but they're very clear, they're very certain to go ahead and kind of thread the needle in a way where there's plausible deniability when shit goes south. And for me, I realized, because I understood the implications of what I did, that I made a massive mistake and I was lied to. And that's what transformed me. And that was my early 20s. And a series of events eventually led to me having that same relationship with the scientific community because I had a masculine disposition when I was in college, and I recognized that my disposition, when I would argue certain points with them, they would just kind of sit there and they would go, "Well, you have a good point, but we don't feel it that way, and that's that." And I realized, well, but the data that you come out with supports my point. It could, but if you look at it in a different way, it really supports the conclusion that we came up with. And I slowly started to kind of realize, I was like, wait a minute, not for nothing, but I could never see myself in a foxhole with any of you. It's like, you're not exactly my type of people. And then I sat back and realized, well, wait a minute, this is kind of how the scientific community works. They found the loopholes. They found out how they could go ahead.
They all find the loopholes. They make it so this way there are loopholes.
Right. And the loopholes allows them to be disingenuous. And I sat back and I said, and that's part of the reason why I don't trust the scientific community, because when I was young and I was inquisitive and I wanted to be a part of it, I recognized, oh, they'll let me be a part of it. They'll just find a way to squeeze me out of it. Right. They'll ignore my papers. They won't they'll just accept my criticisms and they'll just, shove it under the rug. Because the other thing I noticed is that, they keep quoting tons of studies time and time again that get discredited in future papers time and time again. But you know what? That's not how the scientific community works. Because you published it, it's there. It's like the Talmud at certain points. Like the Talmud has tons of awful opinions on it, right? But it's recorded there because it's the dissenting opinion. It was thought of, and therefore you have to consider it. And all they do is just raise it up, and as if it makes it valid.
It returns to this point. Yes, the information is out there, but how many people actually really know where to find it, get it, to even think to look and search for it? Because if everybody knew the right questions to ask, this is another thing. Scorpio is also those moments where you're blindsided by things. You're so blindsided, and because you're vulnerable, you're afraid, you don't know where to turn to, you don't know what questions to ask, you don't know how to, investigate. Due to that, just something as simple as that. I mean, you could be blindsided and then be like in a whole, deep hole of shit, excuse my language, that you have to climb yourself right back out of. That's complete Scorpio.
And again, part of the reason why you're blindsided by that is because you still have to trust. You're not expected to know everything. What happens in Scorpio, this is part of the reason why Scorpio is about power dynamics. Someone is getting the brunt of something, and the other one is getting less of it, partially because that's how it has to be in order for us to share our resources. And there's a reason why the 8th house happens after the 7th house. The 7th house is where you form your contracts, where you basically meet things out and you say, all right, in order for this to work, I have to have, this, and this, and this, and this of the responsibilities. You need to give me this, and this, and then we'll move forward. And contracts are equitable. They're not equal, okay? They're equitable. And in terms of effort, someone will pay $10,000 for a contractor to do a ton of work. That person that's paying $10,000 looks at it and says, I might pay $100,000, to get it done because I'm so incapable of getting it done, right? But it's equitable because of how the market shakes out and what have you. That plays out in the 8th house. That merging the resources, that the actual enactment of that contract, that's where things actually play out. And so in order for things to actually happen, you're going to have a difference in power dynamics. But this only works if you trust that this is going to lead to a certain end, right? So you have a lot of people who do get blindsided because they trusted that, they gave that other person all of this power because they needed that to happen in order for a prior contract to be fulfilled the way they intended it. Okay. And then it doesn't. They get blindsided because they put the trust in the wrong person. It came out of nowhere because, quite frankly, the way they saw the world wasn't true. It wasn't in line with truth. This is the other reason as to why the 8th house in Scorpio is so big into getting to the depths of truth, right? Like the way these houses work, they're not there arbitrarily. It all actually interplays with each other in a very rational, logical manner. And it's just funny because you're watching this play out across the board with all of us. You know, people from the ages of 15 to 54, we're all dealing with this very difficult situation. And it has everything to do with that scorpionic energy. And like I said, you know, the only people holding on are the people who really, truly want to believe. Like Delphina said, if you're going to continue to go that route, you need to transform yourself, right? And depending on whether or not the system will allow them to do that, mind you.
So speaking of transformation, in my opinion, based on, you know, my astrology analysis, you know, the people that have the most to gain via transformation, you know, via the 8th house of Scorpio, would be the people that were born, you know, that are like 54 years to 16 years old. Those are the ones that have the most to gain. Those are the ones that have like the biggest lessons to learn. And so I think would you like to focus on like one Neptune in Scorpio, and then Uranus in Scorpio, and then Pluto in Scorpio, and we can discuss the time frame?
That's an interesting concept, because I think obviously your expertise is going to come in much higher than my broad scope understanding of things, because we can, because the first one's Neptune, right? And those are the ages from 54. You said it exited when?
Yeah, it's 1967. Those born 1967 to 1981, around that time.
1981. Oh, so you're talking all the way up to about 40 years old.
Yep. So those people. Yep.
This is interesting. So obviously, I think you're part of that, right? You know, in that.
Yeah, yes, I am. Yes, I am, and I'm proud
there's
to be
nothing
part
wrong.
of that group.
It's a big group. It doesn't nail you down. It's fun, because let's talk about this, because Neptune is.
Well, let me explain what Neptune is for the listeners. You know, so Neptune. Well, it represents a few different things. It's deception, deceit, fraud, lies, illusions, cheating, spells. Ghosts, spirits, film, photography, water, floods, tsunamis, magic, outer space, you know, outer space, oil, spirituality, things of that nature, right? And so when Neptune, being that it is a watery planet, it's like a mystical, spiritual, watery planet. With Neptune and Scorpio, I mean, we're dealing with our, you know, imagination. We're dealing with our emotions. We're dealing with creativity. We're dealing with, you know, our awareness, our sensitivities about the world, and how we're able to transcend, you know, through difficult situations, you know, given that we're using our intuition. And it's also about us, the way we sense and feel the world around us, you know. But Neptune's also, interestingly enough, it's also about secrets and mysteries, you know, because it's the depth. So think about a water planet in a water sign, going really deep, discovering things, and they could be right there in front of you, but you just don't make that connection. So it takes you a little bit longer to finally click and get that. But the reason you finally get is because you're making that little intuitive connection. But Neptune could also be addiction, you know what I mean? And so, you know, it could also be, in a negative sense, trying to run away from your problems, you know, trying to escape. Neptune could be escapism. So it's all about how you're dealing with it. And of course, excuse me, we could go deeper with this. And I don't want to go too deep because I want people to be able to follow and understand. But, you know, depending on, you know, where your sign Mars is, will tell you, you know, how are you dealing and coping and handling and healing, you know, your Scorpio issues, you know what I mean? But being that it's 8th house matter, matters. I mean, just think about, late 60s and the 70s and 80s. I mean, I think music was really big back then, film,
Sure.
the color. I think we just started getting color,
Yeah.
on television around that
Color
time, right?
television happened actually in the early
Or was
60s,
it
but it
earlier?
became
Yeah. Mhm.
it became mainstream in the late 60s into the 70s and that was a cost problem, because I think it wasn't until they were able to basically create what the Trinitron had, and that happened I think at the late 60s,
Mhm.
and so it became
And then also,
massive by then.
yeah. And then also, Neptune and Scorpio. Neptune's also about, your feeling about nature, how nature, romance, how all this moves you. So just think about, how in the 70s, we had like the hippies, the flower child, everybody, not everybody, but people smoking pot out in the world,
Mm-hmm.
laying, out in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of the forest, or, trying to get very in touch with nature, but really trying to understand this side. But then you have that twist with sex and with drugs and addiction, and that's Neptune and Scorpio. You know what I mean? That's when then everybody wanted to have, what was it called? There was like this term that they used back then, where it's like a free world or free something. I forgot the term that they used, way back when, but it was like everything goes, it's fine, everything's beautiful, you're amazing, let's get high, let's have sex, let's, escape this world because we just got to enjoy it. But then reality sets in, and what
Right.
happens? Well, your escapism is destroying your relationships, it's hurting your ability to survive, pay your bills.
Mm-hmm. Right.
When you were trying to be super romantic with people, that's not working out, because the
Right.
reality is there's a darker side to the world that you're really ignoring and trying to escape from, so there's this journey that people are, embarking, where they have to learn how to, yes, learn about love, learn about spirituality. And that's another thing, spirituality. You could be spiritual by smoking, on the ganja every day, a little
Sure.
cancer, that was all bullshit and tied into, that Neptunian addiction, for abuse, some kind of substance abuse,
Yep.
and that's the dangers of of Neptune and Scorpio. But then why did you do that to begin with? Well, what were you afraid of accepting? You know what I mean? What were you trying to escape? What were you trying to change? And you were afraid of facing those, dark, negative things about your life. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Why were you so afraid of? And then you have to tap into your spirituality to help you get out of it, and then
Mm-hmm.
have that, reality check, and, take those rose colored glasses off, and really see that you're much more powerful than you think you are, and you don't need the dependency on hallucinogens. You know what I mean? You don't need the dependencies on, these sexual experiences. You could be mystical. You could be, you could practice, the occult, but in an esoteric, healthy way,
Mm-hmm.
without having to get hurt or be hurt. But it also shows that Neptune and Scorpio, these people lack boundaries. So now
Right.
think about today. People in this age group, they're learning their lessons, and they're learning that, oh, there are no boundaries. Maybe we should be setting them, but are you afraid to set them? Are
Mm.
you afraid? Because I'll tell you something, a
And
lot of people in my age
hold
group.
on real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna interject right there, because from a political standpoint, right? What's one of the big things you keep hearing? And it did start. I remember being taught by people in this age group when I was in high school, and this is where I first started hearing the concept of whether or not we even need nationalism anymore. This is where the murmurings of do we need borders anymore came from, and it really latched on to this particular group, right? Like, why do we need borders? Why do we need this? Why don't we dissolve them? Because we're really just one people, right? And again,
Yeah, because
Scorpio.
we want to be,
Oh,
Neptune and Scorpio wants to be in utopia. They want to live in the land where everyone's happy and
I
peaceful and all
will
this
say
amazing
this.
stuff.
Always understand that Scorpio always, as a sign, it always
Comes with a price. So what
comes with a
price are you
price.
going to pay for living that way.
And
Well,
in
if you
order to
do
make
that,
it true, in order to make
in
it
order
true,
to make it
because
true,
Scorpio is about
yeah,
truth, and Scorpio is about,
that's right.
whatever you want it to be, you need to make it. It's going to be a heavy price to make it true. And this is the beauty of it. So this is what I wanted to talk about. This is amazing explanation. So let's focus in here, because I haven't thought about this. So we're literally brainstorming.
So think
in the
about
contract.
that. Yeah, I know.
We're breaking,
And the contrast. So
and I had some thoughts come up. So, because again, this is the age group politically talks about ending the border concept, one world, everything, maybe one world government, right? That they're big on that. So who is it? What did you have to learn, right?
Well, let's say once let me put in this kind of context, right? We follow through with the Neptune and Scorpio energy, right? This age group, they're following through with it. And then what are they sacrificing? Well, they start to sacrifice their freedom, because all those jobs that they thought they were going to get are being taken away or replaced by modern technology, or by listen.
No, I know, I love it. I'm sorry, I'm just so excited with your today.
Or by, these they're calling them migrants, but I'm calling them invaders because they're coming here unlawfully, right?
By the way, also fits in with the concept of Neptune, because Neptune is about a little bit of a deception. You could call them, migrants, but in reality, there's something completely different. There's a lie behind it. And what is Neptune really all about? Neptune creates the deception to force you to know the truth.
That's right.
All of this energy is harsh when you're not in line with truth. And when you see through that light, your lie, you're able to pierce through it. You can see it for what it really is. So for that generation in particular, because that was the generation that really experienced, the factory jobs that went away. That's the one that really experienced the real disruption, the consequences of that disruption with a lot of these policies that came into. Now we all have, but that generation in particular really felt it. Very brilliant.
Yep. And so not only that, but the borders being open like that. At one point you're like, yeah, everybody, let's have our block party, right? Let's have our block barbecue. Let's have let's the whole town have a festival at the town park, and everybody's getting together because they know each other, right? But then all of a sudden you have these foreigners coming in and you don't know who anyone is anymore. And you're afraid because you don't know, is your neighbor safe? Can't live with the illusion that everybody's okay. So you become vulnerable. And then what happens? You could be defrauded. They steal your money. At the park, something crazy like that, right? Or they take your identity, you know what I mean? They do things of that nature, because that's all fraudulent and, and illusions, pretending to be your friend, but really you're using those people so you could, take their goodness away, meaning whatever it is that they worked for, their value system, right? Then you have the ones where like drugs, right? Because Neptune is all about drugs and medicine. So everybody's like, yeah, we have this awesome shot jab, right? The C jab, I want to call it, because I want to make sure we keep this show on the road, and everybody's like, oh, it's for your health. It's going to help you. It's going to heal you. Then all of a sudden, everybody's like, yeah, they love us. They're trying to help us, because Neptune is what? It's also compassion. It's also sympathy. It's also trying to connect. It's a water sign. You're feeling empathy, for other people. You don't want other people to be sick. You want everyone to live in this, utopian kind of state. Yes, give us the free meds. All of a sudden you're taking it. You're either one, addicted, or two, it's killing you. And then finally, when it's too late, you realize, oh my God, what did I trick myself into doing? So now you have people that are sick, that are dying, that are addicted. It's like a complete failure, and think about it. A lot of people within that age group are prescription, and modern, medicine dependent. They really are. They're dependent, these people,
And they're watching, by the way, they're watching their futures being eroded through this. right? And this is
Yes.
and the
Yes.
key, if you understand the concept of that age group, it's about 40, 41 to 54, with regards to the major decision that's ahead of us, right? Like a lot of them probably already had kids, and they would, and they're past the age of childbearing for most of them, right? And so
Yeah.
that aspect is settled in the ground for them. But 41 to 54 those are your prime career years. Those are your prime years where you take positions at the highest levels of whatever industry you're a part of. And if you continue to buy into this life or this lie, you'll be robbed from having those years. And that's not just bad for them, but it's also bad for everyone else, because you need to have the people of those ages so that we're all supported by that, by people who are ready to take the reins of power at that position, because everyone 30 shouldn't be president of the United States. It's like,
exactly. But not only that, but by the time you hit your early 40s, you have your Uranus opposite Uranus, and that's where you have, like, they call it midlife crisis, but that's when you're like, you know what, it's all or nothing. Either I'm going to get my shit together and make this ship sail, or I'm just going to completely, let myself drown in water.
That's a great opportunity to talk about Uranus now, because
maybe we should break Uranus up into like another segment, because this one was really long about Neptune.
Right. Honestly, I love everything we're talking about here. So we got like 6 minutes left before they kick us. So I'll have to upgrade this someplace else, but or
it's okay.
Else.
It's no problem.
I think
this is.
I mean, like, Delphina, you got any basic observations about people who are 40 to 54 that I'm sure you probably can think of?
I mean, there's a lot right now, but it's not hitting right, and it's going to go into a way deep topic. So I just want to stay on topic right now. But let me tell you something. I have nothing but contempt for them. So that's the beginning of
what's
it.
the biggest reason why you might have contempt? I'm interested. Just the biggest, like the number one answer, that one thing that you just look at that age group and you go, you're not doing X. What is that X? I'm interested, because you're always in line with truth. That's why you're part of it.
Well, the problem is this. Number one, the entire generation, and this spans the whole spectrum, and this is like Scorpio, they are once again obsessed with sex, and the weirder it is, the more perverted it is, the more they're all into it, because they're pushing boundaries and they're all perverse. And then
That's
the problem
is Neptune lacks boundaries.
Yeah, lacks boundaries.
So lacks boundaries. So unless they learn their lesson with Neptune and Scorpio, I mean, and think about it too, Neptune and Scorpio, they have no boundaries, and that's why so many of them will get STDs, or they'll have issues with their, and
that group in particular was most
with their reproductive system. Yep.
Oh, they have huge problems. Listen, I know that. Listen, the people that I know, and the one that, like, all around, like in that age group, I have nothing but contempt for them, because they deserve everything that they're having come to them, and they all share this common trait: get rich quick scheme. Doesn't matter who they hurt, doesn't matter what they do, doesn't matter what underhanded shady shit they do. They don't think of the long-term consequences. They only think of the short term. Their vision is maybe like a foot ahead. Forget like the 100-mile view. Forget it. They only have a foot ahead. It's like, I want to go do this, 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 and I don't care what I'm going to do to get there. Okay, but the problem is this: once you get it, nobody told them the secret. Getting something is easy compared to keeping it. Okay? Right. Keeping it is hard. Getting money, everybody gets money at some point. Keeping it and growing it and maintaining it, see, that's hard. People get lazy and they assume it's always going to be there. And then they're like, oh shit, it's not. Who am I going to go and steal off of this time? Well, so I once again, and they're extraordinarily selfish.
The other component to make that even true, which I believe this is the case, Neptune is like also glamour. It's glamour. So this is why that age group, Yeah, this is why that age group, and think about it, Knots Landing, Dynasty, and think about the other, things on TV. It's all about that glamour. So that's why there's this desire to, yes, I got to make all that.
Yeah,
I
the
got to make all
deception.
this
Well,
money.
deception,
It's a
glamour is deception.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It is deception. But one more thing that I want to bring up, because our time is like running out, the interesting thing about Neptune Scorpio, when you're going through the lessons and then you're forced to transform, right? You're forced to transform because you just, you pretty much fell on your ass and you got to pick yourself up. You start to have what's called a spiritual experience, because
Yep.
regardless of how difficult, Scorpio is, it is the house of, it is a sign of transformation, but you do transform spiritually. And this is through this spiritual experiences when you learn, one, to accept yourself, and two, to see the world for what it is.
So I'm going to interrupt you real quick, because I was actually talking to my boss today, and she, had to take the big thing. And so she was out at a couple of parties, and she was talking to a lot of people, and they all had a big problem. These are people in their 40s and 50s, this particular age group. And she just told me, like, it was the common refrain was nobody wanted to take it. Nobody wanted to do it because they knew it was bad, but they all wanted to keep making money. So to what Delphina was talking about,
yes,
this
and I've been
idea
seeing the
of this,
same situation and scenario.
and so
Yes.
there's all, and again, what was Delphina just talking about? Get rich quick, do whatever what it takes to make a buck, because here's the other concept as well. Scorpio is still opposite of Taurus, right? So
Yes,
you still have
and
that
it's
relationship
not
to
only,
money.
let me throw something else out there. It's not just about, making money and getting rich. It's about those posh restaurants. I can't tell you how many people, like, I have clients in New York City, and they all got the jab, they're like, I can't go to my restaurant. I can't go into my restaurants. I can't go into my gym. How am I supposed to go to my Broadway shows? It's going to take away from my enjoyment of life. And I said to myself, shit, you're not going to have enjoyment of life come, maybe 3 years, depending what these people are saying.
There you go, Neptune and Scorpio, and these are the people that are paying the price. The reason why they're jumping into it is for those particular reasons. Very interesting. I didn't even think about what this discussion would lead to with regards to that age group, because that's not my age group.
I think it's an absolutely insightful discussion. We all added a lot of really important, cornerstone points.
Let me turn this one off. We're going to get on to Uranus.